Greetings, fellow members of Clan Donald, and thank you so much for joining us this morning for this trip into our shared McDonald past. My name is Alix Christie, and I'm the author of The Shining Mountains, which tells the true story of the mixed-race Scottish and Nez Perce McDonald family, Angus and Catherine McDonald, in the 19th century Rocky Mountain Northwest. I'm extremely grateful to my cousin Eric Wilson, who's able to be here with you this morning in person while I beam in from across the Atlantic. He and I are cousins, descended from two brothers, one who stayed in the Scottish Highlands and the other who came to join the Hudson's Bay Company in 1838 as a fur trader in what would become known as the Oregon Country. Angus was Eric's great-great-grandfather and my great-great-great-uncle. I'm going to tell you something about his life, just a bit to introduce the novel, and then read you a short excerpt. Then, if the technology gods are with us, I will join you via Zoom from Berlin, where I'm currently living. But before anything else, I want to note that you in St. Louis are gathering on the land that was occupied for millennia by indigenous peoples, those whose ancestral homelands these are, and those who were moved onto these lands by the U.S. government. These include the Osage, Miami, and Sioux, as well as the Haudenosaunee. This history is particularly relevant to the story that I tell in this book, because before the settlers, the farmers, the miners, the ranchers, this continent was filled with people from many distinct cultures. The Shining Mountains is about a distinct slice, a particular slice of that pre-American world, which some of you visited during the 2016 AGM in Kalispell. I'm talking about the entire northwest of this country from the Pacific Ocean to the Rocky Mountains. What it is the story of a largely forgotten multicultural society that existed in the first half of the 19th century, blended white and indigenous families, thrown together by the trade in fur. It's a society in which our McDonald clan was deeply involved. This book imagines the lives of the real people who were our distant relatives, who left traces in oral histories and in Western archives. The two people who are the primary protagonists are Angus MacDonald of Glengarry and Glencoe, who, like his great uncle Archibald, traded with native people for fur on behalf of the British concern, the Hudson's Bay Company. Angus spent his life from the age of 21 in the Northwest, from the Columbia River to Montana and Idaho, and he was a key figure at the time of tremendous conflict and change in this period. He was, in fact, the last chief trader for the Hudson Bay Company in what would become the United States. In 1842, he married Catherine Baptiste, who was a woman of mixed Nez Perce, Mohawk, and French descent, who was the niece and cousin of many prominent chiefs of the tribe. She was a remarkable woman in her own right, which I will explain in a minute. But I won't give anything away by saying that they had an incredible love story. It lasted their entire lives, and it was a story of love, resilience, and survival. They actually got married 4 different times. And the novel spans not their entire life together, but the first 30 years from 1840 to 1877, when the United States went to war against Catherine's people, the Nez Perce. Fundamentally, it's a novel about the impact of manifest destiny on one particular family that was caught in the crossfire. I could not have written it if it had not been for the support and advice of my cousins, enrolled members in the Confederated Salish and Kootenai and Nez Perce tribes. And I'm incredibly grateful to them for their support over the 5 years or so that it took to research and write this story. So I'm going to read an excerpt for you that I think captures the two worlds that came together at this time in this particular family. It's a scene when Angus has formally asked for Catherine's hand from her uncle Flint Necklace, who was known to the Americans as Looking Glass. He was a prominent chief. When the story opens and when this particular scene begins, Angus has already been in the country for 2 years in 2 different posts. He formally has asked her parents for her hand, and in return, the Nez Perce have invited, I imagine that they invite him to a kind of a test to see if he is a suitable husband for their very wonderful daughter. And they invite him on a buffalo hunt in Yellowstone Park. And Catherine at this point is in her late teens. She has just returned from a year-long beaver hunting expedition down the Colorado River all the way to Baja California with her father, who was a trapper for the Hudson's Bay Company, a man named Baptiste. Her name in Nez Perce is Tipulena Kitala, which means the eagle rising up. Her mother, Margaret Denai, is a cousin of Flint Necklace, who white people, as I said, call Looking Glass. So there are a couple small vocabulary things you need to know when I read this piece to you. The word Nimipu is the Nez Perce word for themselves. It means the people. The word for their word for white man is Soyapo, which means man who wears a hat. The Nimipu were the primary reason that Lewis and Clark survived their crossing of the Bitterroot Mountains in 1804. The Nez Perce saved them and their horses from death. And the Gaelic word, which you all will know, is Slonia, is a list of a person's ancestry, usually by patronymic. So I am just going to read this scene now. They're in the Yellowstone Park. It's the middle of the winter. They've just had a winter buffalo hunt. And this is where it goes. That night they feast. The women have butchered at least one of the bloody hulks Angus is relieved to see. Soon the smell of roasting fat is smoky caramel in eyes and noses. Dogs wriggle toward the fire. His stomach growls. He sees her finally across the hubbub at the fire and feels his neck hairs lift. She's laughing in a ring of bright, lean faces, dark eyes snapping, white teeth flashing. Among these young Nimipu of both sexes, she stands out, he thinks. She is admired. She'll want one of her own kind, not a white man, a Soyapo, he thinks, his spirit sinking. How he loathes the word. It's much too close to one that means it stinks. All evening he waits for a word from her uncle, any kind of sign. Watching, he sees that she speaks little, though others listen when she does. There's something grave about her, he thinks. They traveled and trapped for nearly a year, Baptiste told him. Even as hardy as his own sisters are, he can't quite see them doing that. Memories stir him then, the grand old stories of yore, and he leaps to his feet, decided. A peacock displays, he thinks, and so can I. He slips to his tent, then into the trees, blowing softly into the bag. He pats the hard leather as it groans and stirs. By the time it's done bleeding, the natives have gone silent, faces turned toward the peculiar sound. He steps out of the shadow, fingers skirling, left arm pumping the inflated bag. He serenades her with the sweet Maid of Mull. A lilting tune, though as he draws breath he has to smile. Half of them cover their ears, the rest shrink as he passes. The bagpipes are piercing, of course, but therein lies their beauty. The pageantry, the sheer peculiar blast of sound. It's not unlike their wailing cries above the drums. Young George is tapping his right hand on his crossed legs, by now familiar with this caterwauling. Then Eagle from the Light stands, Catherine's cousin, and starts to jig in place, a wicked grin across his face. Angus stops before Catherine Baptiste and shifts to the tune he loves best, The Flower of Scotland. Young George starts to clap, elbowing the men beside him, lifting his hands to show them how, and they shrug and smile and start to clap as well. If only his kin could see him now, serenading all these shining faces. The tune breaks off abruptly as they do. In that stunned silence, he gives her a slight bow. Later that evening, he's summoned to Flint Necklace's lodge. When he steps in, he sees that she's waiting between her uncle and a woman who could only be her mother. Catherine looks straight ahead. She has changed into a white skin dress with some blue decoration. As he comes closer, she rewards him with a glance. He's shocked to see a flatness in her eyes. Sweat chills his back. How will he ever reach her? Welcome, trader. Her mother's voice is soft, though her look is penetrating. She's beautiful and terrifying, a Colombian Valkyrie, tall for a woman with a wide face and narrowed eyes, a fall of black and silver hair. It's the eyes and the hard set of her mouth that makes him slightly quake. You've traveled a long way to see us. To see her, he thinks, glancing again at Catherine. By the way her eyes dart away, he can tell she's observing him. Without planning to, he smiles. It's a grand land. Every time I move across it, I'm impressed. She takes this in, her lips softening. There cannot be that many white men who speak their language. Angus stands taller, facing her. You haven't been here long. This is my 3rd winter. I am postmaster at Fort Hall on the Snake. He feels her assessment like a hot wire running up one side of him and down the other. I hear you slaughtered some buffalo, Flint Necklace puts in. He nods and everyone sits. It was too easy. The poor things had no chance. I'd prefer the summer chase, at least how Eagle from the Light describes it. Don't believe everything our nephew says. Her mother smiles dryly and Catherine looks up. She glances at them both, eyes crinkling slightly. He also says you shoot well. I think he's a little jealous. The headman's eyes smile for a moment, but his face remains cool. That's good. There's always someone waiting to take what's yours or kill you for it. In the buffalo country especially, enemies lie in wait. He pauses, his eyes pin Angus. We welcomed your kind when they came. The first ones who came long before your company in the time of Twisted Hair and Red Bear. Then your people came to hunt our mountains. He frowns. You baymen took the game. Angus nods, trying to keep his eyes from the shining girl. I didn't ride to Buffalo as a young man. Flint Necklace signals for a pipe, just now and then for fun. He takes in a rush of air and sighs it out. We had enough in our homelands. But now we trade our horses for your guns. His expression is strange, a mixture Angus thinks of frustration, anger, disgust. We didn't need the guns either before, but now we need the meat, the robes. He leans toward Angus. So we can sell them back to you, and so it goes. Much as I regret it, our destinies are joined. He takes the pipe into his mouth and nods toward Catherine's mother. My brother doesn't say it easily, especially to his own people. She takes the pipe in turn. Life is getting harder. She takes a deep draught, holding Angus with her gaze, then lets the smoke out. Your company has taken and taken. Now it's time to give. He grasps their meaning. If he's to be admitted, Angus must pledge his arms to the defense of his new clan. But that's not it, not exactly. We welcomed this trade. Flint Necklace speaks meditatively. We didn't see how it made us weak. Now we can't live without it. He laughs without mirth and points the pipe at Angus. So you baymen must stand with us against the Soyopa who follow. But I'm only one man, thinks Angus, not the whole company, for this is what the headman seems to mean. I understand our people have been close. He searches for the right words. I'll do everything in my power to assist you, for it is my hope that we will be much closer, as you know. Yes. Her mother leans to scatter a dried herb into the fire. The odor is subtle, a memory of summer. Kitala and I have discussed this. When Catherine looks silently up and nods, Angus understands that she's not allowed to speak while the elders deliberate. There's no further talking then for what seems a long while. Angus waits, eager, overwhelmed. He too shuts his eyes but does not pray. Instead, the image of his own sweet mother comes into his mind. He wishes she could see him now. We are of the Lamtama and Tukpema, her mother speaks at last. I am Margaret Denai. I married a man from the northeast, the father of my daughters, a trapper for your company, Baptiste. She looks hard at him to see that he's attending. Our people have lived in La Mata and along the winding waters for many generations. By her blood, Kitala is partly of your kind, partly of mine. She comes from a great and ancient people. He understands exactly this enumerating of their root and branch. The Gaels have always done it too. I am Angus MacDonald, son of Donald, of the MacDonalds of Glengarry and Glencoe. The ancestor of my clan is young John, Ian Og, descendant of Angus of Islay, Lord of the Isles. Speaking aloud his Gaelic Slania, his lineage, he feels both proud and strange, as much an exotic on display as they to him. They're looking at him with interest and a certain bafflement. Just as he has no idea where La Motta is, so Glencoe means nothing to them. We are not unlike in ancestry. In my country, my clan is also strong and old. The two elders exchange a glance. My brother and I, her mother says, have given this much thought. They don't look that much alike fleetingly, he thinks. The word for cousin is the same as that for brother. Angus waits, a tightness in his chest as she looks toward her daughter. Catherine rises and approaches him, holding out a hand. He clambers to his feet. She dips her head and he takes her fingers in his. Her skin is cool, her hand is light and strong. You'll be one of us, her mother says. He needs to know that she is willing. You choose this too, he inquires, so softly only she can hear. She flushes very faintly. I'm here. It's a start. Her fingers flex and he can feel the way her life force moves. As I will always be for you. He turns to the two elders. You do me a great honor. Then he lifts her hand to his lips and kisses it, his whiskers brushing the dark skin, and is delighted when she trembles and begins to laugh. That then is the end of that scene and the beginning of their life together. And I look forward to talking with you shortly in live, direct from Berlin, and answering any questions you might have. Thank you so much. Bye.